Welcome everybody to the 52nd meeting of Soteria and the last one of this year, 2024, where we shall be continuing our reading of the story by Frank Harris and will resolve the yellow ticket mystery that was introduced last month by Stead. So this is part 2 of our reading, and over to you, Stead.
Well, to all those watching on YouTube, if there is anyone, best thing to do is to stop this recording and watch the first part. But if you've already done that, then welcome. Now, I think that quotation from the Greek says something like to act passionately, so something like that. I don't know whether anyone's got more.
That. I'm gonna paste on the chat the transliteration todrasanti pathein. And todrasanti means inaction and pathein is like suffer. So I don't know how to interpret the entire phrase. But todrasanti I think is inaction, like so maybe to suffer inaction or to actively suffer or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know
but
passionately. Maybe by inaction they mean very emphatically. I don't know.
yeah, to suffer in action or to act, yeah, in a sense of to act passionately in something that may entail suffering, which is part of one of the meanings of passion. Yeah, good.
What does it mean?
But I throw that in.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. Sorry, Janine.
Oh, I was just wondering if the phrase was inaction, meaning that you do nothing, or
Oh no, no. I think it's an active. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, not in action as a noun. AJ, as you offered that, would you be able to begin? Is that big enough, by the way, the text?
Well, you sent me the PDF, so I can use my own. Okay.
Okay.
I could possibly
Do you want?
it's a little bit blurred, so it's perhaps helps to be a bit bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, is that better?
That's better.
Yeah. Okay. All right then.
So you want me to do it still?
Yes, please, if you would.
Okay. You see, doctor, I've come to you in winter as you came to me in summer. What wretched weather we're having. I seem to feel the cold more than I ever did. Yes, I'm here as a patient with the same tiresome question. To me, you're the manager of the bank, and I want you to tell me how my account stands with Messrs. Life and Company, the bankers. The words and tone of the Count of Orem's greeting were evidently meant to show unconcern, but there was a feverish anxiety underlying his seeming carelessness, which did not escape Dr. Dupuy. The keen gray eyes of the doctor had observed, too, slight but significant changes in the Count's appearance. The hair had thinned, the face had lost something of its healthy brown hue, and under the eyes the skin was purple. After a careful examination of his patient, the doctor asked thoughtfully, "And your symptoms? Have you noticed nothing but the cold, felt no other signs of weakness?" "Each day I discover something new, but whether important or not, you must say. For instance, a month or 6 weeks ago, I stepped from the footpath into the street without looking, and that gave me a shock. Why didn't you come to me then? Laissez-aller, I suppose. Now I've come to take care when getting up from a chair or sitting down in one. This guy's just getting old. My careless movement shakes. I'm growing stiff. I'm getting sleepy too." What? I'm sorry, I thought somebody said something.
I think Janine was just chuckling.
Oh, just my comment. I couldn't help it. I get sleepy too after a ride or after meals, yet I eat nothing. I've no appetite. I always feel tired now. The candle's burning down in the socket, isn't it? I rest my case. Yeah. Your pulse is thin, regular. The nervous system slightly overstrained. Your heart, you see, was never very strong. I knew it, but I want you to tell me what part of my capital I've spent, how much still remains to me. You want the truth? Well, I should say that you've lived 10 years in these last few months. The capital has shrunk more than 1/2. View, I never know how to pronounce that with W.
No.
Phew.
You.
You? That's worse than I feared. To go back now to the old habits of my life would do no good. It's too late. Oh no, far from it. But you can never expect to be the same man again you were 6 months ago. Youth can go back and begin afresh, but age hardly. The Count drew a long breath. That's what I wanted to know. Now, one more question which I ought to have put to you before. Suppose my wife had a child. Will it be healthy, or will the weakness of my age infect it? I can't answer that. Opinions differ on the point. Mine is that a child born of youthful parents has a spring of vigor, a recuperative power in it, which the children of older people haven't got, but the offspring of a father past his prime and young mother is often strong and healthy. I should say your child would be all right, but you haven't any hopes. When we're done, you want some real science on that, I can give it to you. Okay. I think so. Now, I want to ask a favor of you. You're always here in the morning, aren't you? Always. I never go out till 1 o'clock. Well, should anything happen to me, should my weak heart, for instance, fail, as you know it may, Pierre, my old servant, will come here for you, and I want you to promise me to go with him and break the news to my wife. There's no one else in the world I could ask who would do it so well. You can speak to her of her unborn child. Her love for it will help her in the sorrow and enable her to face the future. Time and her youth must do the rest. Of course, you know I'll do anything for you that I can, but you mustn't talk like that, nor let your thoughts dwell on such things. You have 5 or 6 years of life still in you, barring accidents, and your wife, I imagine, wouldn't thank you for throwing them away. You think so, do you? Well, you are nearer right than you know, Marie. And the short laugh ended in a sigh. Marie, and his voice lingered now on the word with inexpressible tenderness, is Marie. Had I but known one could be so good, but how could I know that? Yet had I known but 6 months ago. That's the bitterness of it. The thought's enough to drive one mad. What coarse, selfish fools we men are. We judge women by ourselves, nay, not even by the best in us, but often by the jests and cynicisms and sneers of others. And we won't see the truth. We shut our eyes obstinately to the fact that there are women in whom affection is life itself, who live by giving, and whose devotion is inexhaustible. Was it oil the Magdalene poured out on her, or her heart's blood? There are women who would use their blood gladly if work were needed by the men they love. And we say they want this and that. It's natural. You said it to me 6 months ago. I don't blame you. You only echoed my own thought. But what they want, the good ones, is love. Oh, and there are others. Yes, of course there are. If there weren't, we shouldn't misjudge the good ones as we do, to our own hurt and theirs. But talking of one's mistakes doesn't remedy them. More is the pity. Doctor, I made up my mind on the way here. If my case stood as I see you think it stands, to tell you about my wife, so that you might know how to speak to her when the time comes. But I can't find the words. There are things one cannot speak of even where need is greatest. But remember this, all my folly is my own. My wife is so womanly and yet so much of an angel that I, loving her, underrated her. Think of it and be careful. No selfish consideration will touch her. Unselfish, ideal ones will move her to martyrdom. So speak of the child. Tell her how I longed to see her training, how content I was to think of it in her care, how certain I was that she would be a perfect mother. Afterwards, when the first grief has passed, you may say that I wished her to feel completely free. If she ever thinks of marrying again, let no memory of me come in her way. Ah, doctor, I've been very blind. Dante saw the truth. A man, you know, was his guide through the circling depths of hell, but a woman's soul led him up the heights toward the light. You'll be careful, won't you? Yes, replied the doctor gravely. I'll do my best, you may be sure. But again I warn you, and I was right before, wasn't I? You ought now to live by rule. Why not spend the winter in the south? Take exercise, live in the open air. I'll send you a nerve tonic, and 5 years hence we'll talk the matter over again. Perhaps I shall, it's not for me to say. I want to make no more mistakes, but I feel a little like the gambler who has lost too much to stop playing.
Mm.
Besides, I've followed my inclinations all my life, lived for my taste, and I'm afraid my will has grown feeble by disuse.
Mm.
For weeks past, I wanted to come to see you, but I couldn't leave her, couldn't bear to part from her even for an hour. An hour with Marie, you don't know what that's worth to me. Goodbye. If I knew how to thank you, I'd do it, for your promise means very much to me. Goodbye. And the two men's hands joined. The door had scarcely closed behind the count when the doctor threw himself into a chair and gave himself up to his thoughts, which ran thus. He'll do it very likely, and yet he's no fool. That remark of his about the disuse of his will was sensible. Oh, these idealists. They talk to you about the blue vault of heaven, where there's no vault and no heaven, and no blue save in their own eyes. Angel indeed. Fancy a man of the world, and that he is, or ought to be, healthy, rich, with a great position, and not superstitious, throwing 15 years of a pleasant life away for a thin schoolgirl, who has the wit to play echo to his voice. And yet he infected me with his sadness. I felt sorry for him. Strange. Generally, I have no feeling save curiosity in the presence of any form of lunacy. Well, he did me a good turn once, and I'm glad to be able to do something for him and so clear off the debt. I'll follow his lead too with her. Women are always playing some part or other, but they like us to accept the assumed character as the real one. The wise man amuses himself by playing up to them if it suits him, that's all. I wonder, though, how soon the angel will think of a new role, when she finds herself free to do as she pleases and rich. He's sure to have left her everything he could. Poor devil, he was always weakly generous.
Thanks, AJ. Michael, would you care to continue?
You mean me?
Yes.
As the Count was driven rapidly homeward, he couldn't avoid thinking of Dr. Dupuy, for the doctor's manner now and then had seemed to him unsympathetic. Characteristically enough, he tried to argue himself out of this feeling. Perhaps I was overwrought, and so felt things too keenly. Yet I couldn't talk to him about Marie. But then to whom could I talk freely of her? He seemed to be examining my mental state critically when I showed him only a part of her manifold perfection. Doctors, I suppose, like all other workmen, bear about with them traces of their craft. They are occupied so exclusively with the diseased body that health, the perfect balance of all faculties, seems uninteresting to them, and they've no time whatever to think of the soul. But Dupuy's a good fellow. At any rate, he's to be trusted to do what he promised. How he'll do it is another matter. I'll write to him when the time comes, and then he'll take my letter to her. I'll find words from the grave to lessen her grief, to comfort her, my darling. And the Count bit his lip to keep back the tears. Oh, the misery of it, and the pity! Had I but known you, Marie! But Who could imagine perfect surrender and joy in self-restraint? Had I but known, but who could know that a child woman could match every wish and desire of a man and yet possess her own soul in a sacred longing for the highest, the best? To have thrown away 10 years' companionship with Marie is to me worse than the bitterness of 10,000 deaths. To have lost that and all out of sheer ignorance, what a torture chamber life is. This evil and that numberless follies, crimes even one commits, they all pass unpunished, unnoted. Then one does something, not even selfishly, but ignorantly, and one's scourged by scorpions of remorse till the soul sickens and the brain's distraught. Fool that I am! The world's but a cunning machine. Woe to him who's caught in the whirling teeth of the wheel. Yet if we were punished justly, adequately for our offenses, who'd complain? Whipped for the follies, mutilated for the faults, 'twould be well. Long ere this, mankind so schooled would have risen to free and happy lives on the God-illumined heights. But no, once tempted by immunity, cozened into confidence, and then for some small misstep, taken hesitatingly, not of desire, as a child moves in the dark, one's racked and flayed and done to death in useless martyrdom. How I rave! Revolt's silly, to live and curse the conditions of life. Childish! I'll try to think sensibly. I'm going back to Marie and can defy hurt when I've that thought to cling to. Ah me, how divine a thing life may become when man learns how to live. Marie, Marie, there's peace and joy and blessing in the very name. What does anything matter when I've days yet or weeks or months or perhaps even years to spend with her who can crowd the emotions of a lifetime into a moment? I'll think of her always, and she'll save me from that dreadful night of remorse. She'll save me. When was Marie slow to help? I'll never think of the end at all. Why should I meet pain halfway? I'll think of her, and no remorse or bitterness can touch me then. I'll act as may be best for her when the time comes, but I'll not torture myself beforehand. I'll think of her, and the music of her voice will be in my ears, and her smile in my eyes, and her hands in my hands, and the sweetness of her loveliness. These will dwell with me to the end. The horses crawl, and she'll be anxious for my return. I wonder when she'll tell me her secret. The mystery of it is about her now. The doctor in Dupuy doubted me, took it for senile conceit, I suppose. How much he misses of life's best, that poor doctor. But I think of Marie. When she feels the child quick in her, when the joy of motherhood comes to her even in anticipation, then she'll want to share her bliss with me. Now all's fear and wonder in her. Will she be shy, or nobly frank, or something much finer, more beautiful and more natural than my dull brains can imagine? All possibilities in her save deceit. Until she speaks, I'll see nothing, notice nothing. Of course, Marie shall keep her secret, unpolluted by look or hint or word of mine till her own heart renders it. Tonight I'll be very cheerful. She's anxious about me, divines something of my secret, which must be guarded to the end for her sake, for I've no joy to share. She gives, and I receive with thanks. That's all.
Okay, thanks so much, Michael. Janine, would you kindly continue?
Yes, chapter 4, Life's Loneliness. A couple of weeks after the visit of the Count to Dr. Dupuy, husband and wife were seated together one evening in front of a cedar wood fire. A great Japanese screen in the 3 panels, gorgeous with strange birds in mother of pearl and animals in gold lacquer and flowers with ivory leaves, framed them in from the length and height of the drawing room. The Count was in an armchair with shaded candles behind him. The Countess, on a low cushioned seat in front, her right arm resting on his knees, was gazing into the fire. Pierre tells me, You used to read every evening before you married, and now you scarcely ever open a book. Why is that? My learning time is over, child, and if you must know, my eyes are not as strong as they were. Besides, I find it more interesting to have your companionship. I feel that too. I never wish to be away from you, even for a minute. But I do leave you now sometimes. Do you know where I go? She went on as if talking to herself. To the church to pray. I used to pray quick in the morning before the crucifix in my dressing room and hurry to you. Only at night I prayed seriously, prayed that when sorrow should come to us, as sorrow comes to all, that I might bear the pain. I have been glad to suffer for you. 'Twould have been sweet to make our love secure, as you were safe. But now I want to go to the church and pray before a shrine to the Divine Mother. The voice was very low, but the Count heard. You know why, my husband, I saw you knew weeks ago. That made me very shy, so I didn't speak. But now I must. For Raoul, I want you to share my joy and to come with me. You will. I know you don't believe as I do, and I used often to think we'd be punished because of your unbelief and because I did nothing to change you, but I couldn't. I was too happy and loved you too much. I used to think if we had to suffer, it didn't matter much so long as we were together. But now, Raoul, we're not alone, and it doesn't seem fair that another life should perhaps suffer for our sins. So I want you to come with me. I knew you would, just as you do everything I wish. That's what made it hard to ask you. Do you know, it seems to do me more good now to pray to Mary. I feel she understands me better than it ever did to pray to Jesus or to God. And oh, I want to pray so often, for my heart's always trembling. Often at night I lie awake and grow cold with fear. I don't know what of. Doesn't life come on one quickly? A little while ago you took me from the school, and then you brought me here and showed me how strange and beautiful and full of joy life was. And now I feel as if my turn were come to live my life alone. No, I don't mean quite that, but as if I had duties, other duties than a wife's. I've tried to please you as a wife. I really tried. It made me happy to try to do what I thought you'd like, even when at first it seemed hard, almost wrong to do some things. The Count bent forward and stroked the small head lovingly. Later 'twas easy, and as she spoke, she suddenly leant back and, winding her arms about her husband's neck, kissed him on the lips. But now, she went on, leaning an arm on his knees as before, and turning to the fire. I must think of our child. How strange and wonderful it seems. I feel lonely now,
Lonely.
very lonely. For all by myself, I must think of things, not with and for you, which was always companionship, and decide by myself. I am proud and anxious and glad and fearful, lonely and never alone, all together. You must never think I love you less, dear. I love you more. Do you notice I never tease you now? My scholar husband is perfect now in my eyes. You were always so gentle and kind. I used to think I'd like to see you angry, really, like to feel a little afraid of you and tremble and admire you. So I used to tease you that perfection might become imperfect to suit my girlish taste. But now I'm quite content, more than content, for on you I can rest securely, and I want to feel safe now. Life is chanceful enough and far too dangerous to let me wish for doubts of you and conflicts, victories or defeats between us. I'm glad to feel quite secure here. It may weary you, though, never to be teased, to be loved always without ever being tormented. No? How sweet that no was. Isn't it strange? You mustn't think me superstitious, but I know our child will be a boy. If it were a girl, all be easy for me, but a boy will need you to help me. He'll soon be bold and strong, reckless and self-willed, as young men should be, and I'll not know how to control him. I want to be perfect mother and perfect wife. I'll be very proud of him, as I am of you, dear, only in a different way. Have I been a good wife, Raoul? A charming one? Well, that's because I loved you. Besides, I wouldn't be outdone. How it delights me to feel in the lingering caress of your hands that you love me as much as ever. That's my reward. But now the paths divide. I mustn't ride with you any more. You know 'twould be dangerous. Oh, he'll be manly, I'm sure, and a great man, I hope. When I've grown old, it'll make me young again to see the girls in love with him. Aren't you glad, Raoul? Isn't it a joy? Say, a great joy, dear. I'm glad and happy. I should think you would be happy, happy indeed, wild with joy. Wild with joy, the Count repeated, smiling. And you'll stay with my son and me, always kind as you are now? You will not begin to leave us? No, that's good to hear. I wonder whether any woman in the world has ever as perfectly contented as I am now. The Count's love for his young wife was so intense that it enabled him to show her perfect sympathy and tenderness so long as it was with her. But as soon as he found himself in his bedroom alone, pain mastered him, for he was not only weakened by the humility which is the flower of love, but tortured by the cruel diffidence of age, and the courage in him forced him to realize what he conceived to be his position. His thoughts ran somewhat thus: so it was all for the best, and my self-reproach vain. I must go on as I began. She doesn't need me. All these months she's wanted to tremble and be afraid of me. Her conqueror, and what was it? Yes, the boy will be bold and strong, reckless and self-willed as young men should be. And I thought I could fill her life, realize her ideal, was necessary to her. Well, I was mistaken, that's all.
Mm.
Yes, as it's best for her, clearly. And that's what I ought to want to do. That's what I ought to want. Yet how the little blindness of those we love pierced through the joints of our harness, reached the heart and hurt. But then I could have loved her so well had she been different. She's a woman child still, and life, as she said so sweetly, has come upon her quickly. It's natural in her to love even the trappings of boldness, the braveries of youth. She'd have suffered fearfully had I seemed perfect to her. It's best as it is. Even the woman we love cannot know us wholly. One is always alone in the world, quite alone. Marie has begun to realize this too. Ah, me. And her nature's not even formed yet. But at any rate, she shan't be plagued with a poor, feeble, tottering wretch. My pain's for her good. That's enough. I shall rest well, and she'll find content easily.
Thank you. Heward, would you kindly continue?
So if you roll it up, yes, thank you. It was a bitter morning towards the end of January. An icy northeast wind whistled through the bare branches and along the deserted walks of the Parc Montmorceau, driving before it the few small flakes of snow which drifted, as it seemed hesitatingly, from the leaden clouds that cloaked the sky. The gloomy, bitter day seemed to intensify the warmth and the cheerfulness of the morning rooms in the Hotel d'Avaren. The room had been transformed by the will of the Countess, and it was with no small satisfaction she now regarded her handiwork. And in truth, the room had gained in comfort and attractiveness by her alterations, even if it had lost somewhat in character. 2 or 3 coipes, a magnificent collar, half a dozen watercolors shed peace and summer radiance from the walls. Some Louis XV chairs and cabinets too rested the eyes and amused the senses. The great bronze mantelpiece, designed and executed by Barrier, now adorned the hall, but in its place was a charming full-length portrait of the Countess, craftily painted by Carolus Duran. The sketch had been a masterpiece. He kept it in his studio. Portrait was a picture showing something, traces of genius and real mastery of hand. As the Countess moved about the room in a pretty loose dressing gown, arranging masses of hothouse flowers with a certain conventional deftness of choice, one who had known her before her marriage would scarcely have recognized her. Her beauty would have been denied now by no one. The figure was rounded to womanly perception of curve. The stately carriage of the head did not recall her former nun-like appearance. Still, however, in obedience to her husband's wish, the Countess wore her hair in the old simple braids and knot, and so she still preserved something of the subtle charm which belongs to a marked individuality. And her cheeks were fallen, the oval of the face more perfect. Her eyes had gained in colour, even the rings around them added a certain languor of expression that but increased their loveliness. Yet the woman's beauty was more conventional than the girl's had been. One missed the intellectual severity of outline, the promise too of indefinite development, which had given to the girl's face an extraordinary fascination. When the flowers were arranged to her liking, the Countess rang. "You can serve the breakfast, Pierre, but first tell the Count that it's ready." "Oh, Madame, Monsieur le Comte has been ready a long time. He told me to tell Madame he had important letters to write, but he'd be quite ready by 12 o'clock. It's nearly 12 now. Monsieur le Comte, I think, doesn't sleep as well as he used to. He misses his rights, I'm sure, and the Countess didn't seem to be listening." Pierre broke off abruptly and disappeared. "That's true," said the Countess half to herself when alone with a slight pang of remorse. "I'm afraid I'm growing selfish. I must get him to go out as he used to. He'll enjoy it, and I shall have more time for certain other duties, which too are pleasures." And she smiled softly as she sank into a large causeuse and abandoned herself with a sense of exquisite enjoyment to a reverie rose-tinged. When Pierre entered his master's rooms and delivered his message, the Count, without turning towards him, answered simply, "Tell the Countess I shall be down in a quarter of an hour or so, and let me know when the breakfast's served. And Pierre, decant a bottle of the old Madeira, bring me a tumbler of it at once. I don't feel very well this morning." "Monsieur le Comte does not mean the 84? That would be waste for a glass, like drinking gold." "Do as I tell you, Pierre," replied the Count quietly, adding as if to himself, "I might drink pearls now without extravagance." As the door closed, he went on thinking aloud. "So, all my affairs are in order. These 2 letters were all I had to do. The Princess, frank, kindly as she will be, with the best of friends, to Marie for my sake. This letter to Dupuy, which I won't seal up until the last moment, will be a guide to him and to Marie, do Marie good when she reads it. I wonder only if the postscript's right. Will it help her? Yes, I asked Dupuy to give her the miniature of my mother. Marie will value that for my sake, and the cross they gave me after Gravelotte. I don't care for it, but she'll be glad to know I won it. Had I known her when, I might still have perhaps realized her ideal. It's always too soon or too late in this world, I perceive. But why should I make moan? It's perhaps best as it is. I've often thought lately that the age she feels in me makes her lean to youth and delivery more than she otherwise would. It's all my fault, the fault of age. Besides, I've lived too much with books and by myself outside the world of action to be bold and confident. Her finer sense may have felt this as a fault. It is better so, she'll suffer less. I wonder, do women grow as men may go all through life? Their desires seem bounded by the goal of motherhood. What a perfect mother Marie will be. How I wish I could have seen her with her child. He sighed heavily. The child will console her, I feel sure. At this moment, Pierre entered the room with the wine. The Count drained the glass offered to him and without turning round said, "Leave the bottle here and tell me as soon as breakfast's served. Don't keep it back from me, I'm quite ready." "But Monsieur le Comte's not really ill?" asked the old man hesitatingly. "No, Pierre, not really ill, I hope, but a little out of sorts. Post this letter, and remember when you come to wake me in the morning, if you ever find a letter on the table near my bed for Dr. Dupuy and I asleep, you must take it at once and deliver it. Do you understand? You must give it to the doctor as soon as you can." "Yes, Monsieur le Comte," replied Pierre in a somewhat aggrieved tone. "I understand, but the doctor's no good. If Monsieur le Comte would ride every morning as he used to do, go to the Salle d'Armes 2 or 3 times a week, he'll be as limber and well now as he was a year ago. Monsieur le Comte told me that exercise was good, although I think as we grow old, we easily do too much, especially before breakfast. Monsieur le Comte should try a little glass of cordial in the morning. That warms the blood and seems to give new life. But then, habits, everything. Monsieur le Comte has broken his habits. He's not well. He should go back to them. Madame, I'm sure it should be grand. She'll do anything for Monsieur le Comte's self. She's no so good."
So thanks, Stuart. Michael in in Cologne, would you? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Pierre, I know. But now go on with your work and let me know when I'm to come down. As the servant left the room, the Count got up from the desk and walked to the dressing table and looked at himself in the glass. "No, I've not got complete control of it yet, though I can move it a little now. I believe the Madeira's better than Dupuy's tonic. Was it chance or science that made him hit on the very symptom which shows itself in my case? He said, in that first talk we had together, that an eyelid might droop and I'd not have the power of pulling it up again. Chance, evidently, for he told me the other day that a dose of his tonic would chase away any such symptom in half an hour, and 2 doses have not given me control of this left eyelid in 3 hours. I'm weaker, I suppose, than he thought it possible to be without something giving away. That means I've no time to lose or to keep, is it? I don't feel frightened, not at all. Life has, on the whole, been good to me. This last 7 months as nearly perfect happiness as man has ever known or can know. Come, be a man, Raoul. Don't think of the parting from her, or you'll be fit for nothing. And don't think of the grave, for that's silly. The worms won't eat you. You won't feel anything. Suppose you'd had a leg cut off. Its destination wouldn't trouble you much. The worms might eat that and welcome. And you see now it's best for her as it is. You know that, don't you? Close your eyes and think of the best moments in these last months. What sweet memories. Today I'll do whatever she wishes. Try to give her 12 happy hours. Then this last day will be a joy to me. It was my fate to die so. No illness, no senile weakness in body or mind. Life rounded off to a perfect close with Marie to the last. I'll think of today and not trouble myself about what comes afterwards. Even now, Marie is waiting for me. Ah, the eyelid's under my control at last, so I can go downstairs. How badly the writers have described a man's last day on earth. His face doesn't alter. He doesn't rave with fear and horror. Perhaps it is that even death grows common by acquaintance. I feel almost light-hearted. It is very well as it is for both of us. I wish, though, I had done something to pay my debt to mankind. And yet what could I have done but say that part of every life should be given to books and things of beauty? No one could make much of that. The regret so slight, it doesn't hurt. Someone else will help men more than I could have done had I laboured all my life. Now I go to Marie, calm, yes, but with a catching of the breath and too much self-absorbed. All right, Pierre, the wine has done me good. I'll go down. As he entered the room, the Countess came quickly towards him. Half an hour I've been down, sir, 30 minutes by the clock. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? My love, how well you're looking this morning. There's colour in your cheeks. You're quite your old self. But you mustn't keep me waiting so, Raoul. These last 5 minutes have been 5 ages. That's 20, replied the Count with a quick smile, as he put his hand caressingly on her shoulder. 5 minutes are 5 ages. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, but I've been thinking of you, and so the time passed quickly. Do you know what I've been thinking? I'd like to have a perfect day today, do whatever you may wish, gratify any whim of yours, any fancy, lend myself to your mood, be sentimental or gay, pleasure-loving or pedantic, husband or lover, soldier or saint, just as you, my queen, may decide for this one day. I'm too stiff to play a new part long. How light-hearted you are, laughed the Countess. Let's have breakfast first, and I'll tell you what I'd like when I've had time to consider. I'll take full advantage of such unwonted generosity, you may be sure. A few moments later, she took up the thought again seriously. Do you know what I'd like? I'd like to ask Madame de Rivarol to dine with us. I want to show her this new room, and I want to talk to her. Besides, we've scarcely seen her since our marriage, and that's selfish of us, very selfish. The Count's face had changed a little at his wife's proposal, but before she had finished speaking and looking up for his assent, he had mastered himself and answered in his usual quiet tone. I'd have preferred to spend the day with you alone, but I've promised, so be it as you will. Yes, she said gaily, but with a tone of affectionate tenderness in her voice. And so should I, but we shall have until dinner time together, lover mine. Besides, I think I've been selfish in keeping you so entirely to myself. That reminds me. You must begin your morning rides again tomorrow. No, I'll take no refusal. They do you good. You can't deny it. And it'll do you good, too, to meet people. You mustn't be so much of a recluse. It's your one failing. Besides, I want to see Madame de Rivarol very much. She's been very kind to me, and I have things to talk about with her in which even you, sir, are not learned.
Thank you, Michael. I'll read for a little bit. After a long and pleasant evening, Madame de Rivarol took leave of her children, well pleased with their manifest happiness. Although it wasn't really late, yet as soon as her visitor had left, the Countess proposed to retire. She had grown careful of her health lately. Mutely, the Count assented by rising. He stopped at the door, however, and, turning, cast a long look over the room. As he closed the door, his heart almost ceased to beat. Everything he did now seemed to say to him, "It's for the last time." Yet he went on, scarcely pausing. As one in a dream, he followed his wife into her bedroom, and when she went into her dressing room, he placed himself mechanically near the almost closed door, and leaning against the wall, waited for her return while she talked. He was only conscious of pain in the heart. His thoughts were feelings. His soul seemed to gasp and faint within him. Never again, he felt, in throbs of agony, shall I be near her as now, never again pass another evening beside her, never again. And then time seemed to hasten and leap, as did the pumping of his heart. Soon she'll come out and kiss me for the last time, he thought. And then he saw himself going to his own rooms and felt the darkness come about him. All at once, his love seemed to bring him courage in a warm wave. He listened to her then while he could and live every minute to the end. And so he heard, "We must go out more and entertain a little. I don't mean now, but in a year or so. It will do you good. You never were more charming than this evening. Your madam to Madame de Rivarol was perfect, so sympathetic and deferential. I was very proud of you, and yet just a little jealous. Going into the world will make you brighter, young again, in fact, though you're younger now than most young men." "Yes," interjected the Count with an effort. His throat was parched. But his wife evidently noticed nothing strange in the strained, toneless voice, but he went on, "I want to know life and be very worldly wise for my child's sake later. When he grows up, he must find friends and a place in the world ready for him. I feel I ought to begin at once to make sacrifices for him. Don't you?" And as she asked the question, the Countess opened the door and stood before her husband in her dressing gown with unbound hair. The fragrance of her youth and beauty had never seemed to the Count to be so intoxicatingly seductive. "Yes, dear," he replied, carried away from his own thoughts and brought to self-possession by the sight of the woman he loved. "But don't make useless ones. The vanity and envy of the world aren't a good milieu. The finest flowers only grow in garden and hothouse. But now tell me," and as he spoke, he took her in his arms with an infinite tenderness, "are you glad now, Marie, that you yielded to my love and married me?" "How can you ask such a silly question? Of course I'm glad, more than glad. I've been very, very happy and shall be even happier soon, I think." And she sighed contentedly, while the Count drew a deep breath as if oppressed. "You see, Raoul," and here she wound herself out of his arms and spoke with excited earnestness, "I want my child to be very proud of his mother, and I think he'll be pleased later if I'm someone in our Woman's Kingdom Society." "I understand. Besides, I think one gets peculiar when one lives much alone, just as one gets stiff by sitting too long in the same position. A little change and excitement does everyone good. What good reasons one can find for what one wants to do." "Yes," and the Countess laughed, nodding her head. "But at the same time, Raoul, you will always be more important to me than all the other people put together. You don't doubt that, do you?" "No." And the Count drew another deep breath. This time his wife heard the sigh. "But you're tired, Raoul, and so pale, dear. Your high spirits have worn you out. Now say good night at once and go to bed." And as she spoke, she came to him and put her arms, from which the sleeves slipped back round his neck, and held her face up to be kissed. Holding her to him and looking into her eyes, the Count asked, "Tell me first, you've been really happy with me, very happy?" "You know I have," the girl wife answered, nodding her head as she spoke, and shutting and opening both eyes rapidly several times in a peculiarly childish way, which, however, added earnestness to her words. "And now, good night, dear, and mind you sleep well." AJ, would you continue as I think you started?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm actually a little more awake now, so. The Countess had been asleep for more than an hour when the Count rose from his bed, put on a dressing gown, and began quietly to make certain preparations. He first closed his door gently, and then coming back took a bottle from his cabinet, and laid a silver syringe beside it ready for use on the little table by his bedside. Out of the same cabinet he took the letter to Dr. Dupuy, and read it carefully over. I can't better that, he said to himself at length, but the request to give her my cross is foolish. Petty, wounded, vanity. And I have done with vanities now. Besides, she's quick and sensitive too. She might understand from it that I wish to reproach her for some thoughtless speech. What poor creatures we men are, that may have been at the bottom of my thought. As he spoke, he carefully cut away that part of the postscript and burned it in the candle flame. As it shriveled to ashes in his fingers, he continued thinking aloud. Strange. I have no hesitations now, no shadow of fear, a regret of habit and of memory. As lovers cherish withered flowers for their remembered sweetness, so we cling to life when all its perfume is spent. And even such regret is dulled by the inevitable. Napoleon's word is vulgar. There's a better than 2 o'clock in the morning courage, the courage which has nothing physical in it, but which comes altogether from the intelligence, whether of the thinker or the artist. To end life fitly, as a tale well told, that's enough for my measure. One puts away the empty glass. Better blow out the candle than let it flicker and gutter impotently to its sense-disgusting end. As he spoke, he closed the letter to Dr. Dupuy and laid it with its address upwards on his table. He made a movement as if to throw off his dressing gown, but paused on the action. No, I'll look at her once again before I go. And he pressed his lips together tightly, as it pained him to draw his breath. I knew I should, I meant to, otherwise I'd have gone mad in these last 2 hours waiting. That was the thought which kept the pain away. Again I'll see the face that lights the world for me. Marie, my love, my soul's delight, how could I go without a last farewell? Quietly he passed through his dressing room and entered his wife's chamber. By the dim light of the veilleuse at the bed's head, he saw she was sleeping with her back to his apartment. The thought gave him a sense of keenest pleasure. She felt secure on that side. He moved round the foot of the bed and looked at her as she slept, his soul in his eyes. A minute perhaps he stood so, and then, as if drawn by an irresistible power, passed to her side and, stooping, laid his lips on her forehead. The girl didn't hear the breathing of her name, nor feel consciously the lips upon her brow, but nevertheless she moved in her sleep and drew a long breath as of complete content. As he came into his own room again and closed the door behind him quietly, the Count stood rigidly for some time, holding his breath, as if the slightest movement would have been too much for his strength. Then, with a deep sigh, he sank down in an armchair. A little later, the words broke from him. That's the terror of it and the torture. If I could have been with her for 2 or 3 years more, her future would have been safer, for she's very clear-sighted. Now I dread the sex in her. She may fall in love with some rollicking devil-may-care soldier whose boldness comes chiefly from health and carelessness of others' suffering. Why should that thought sting me so? Partly the wretched selfishness in me, I suppose, but more because she'd suffer terribly, my delicate darling. But she'll have time to think. Her child and her own great clear eyes will save her, I hope. The bitterness of it all. How I wish I could have been with her 2 or 3 years more, just to guide her and leave her safe. But is one ever really able to guide another? Ah me, is this life impotence itself a consolation? How I suffer, perhaps she'll suffer someday as I'm suffering now. Ah, I mustn't think. But I but fall from deep to lower deep of agony. And yet it's probable. We all follow the same road, life's road which leads no whither. Impenetrable night shrouding its end as its beginning. And every soul must tread that road alone. Oh, Marie, Marie, my poor darling. Forgive me, dear, the pain it'll cause you. Ah, she'll forgive, there's no doubt of that. One thing stands sure. In her eyes, I've seen the love that will yet redeem humanity. And so she lights the darkness. Could I but do as much for her? Can I do nothing more for her? And as he spoke, the Count rose. Nothing save leave her for her good. I'm very tired now, tired past thought. I'll go. He went over to the table and filled the syringe. How greedily it sucks the morphia up. Child that I am. It's only a machine. Am I more? As he spoke, he put the bottle carefully away in a drawer. Dupuy will know where to find it. Then, looking at the syringe, he thought again aloud. What a small key to unlock that door. Going out in the night, one should open and close the door quietly, so as not to disturb the household. Where should I put it in? It doesn't matter. The keyhole's not larger than a pinprick. And as he spoke, he lifted on his breast a small pinch of flesh between the thumb and forefinger of his left hand. He then inserted the needle-like point of the syringe and carefully injected the whole of its contents. After looking to make sure that the instrument was empty, he washed it and dried it, replacing it then in the same drawer in which he had put the bottle. Progress? Yes. Better means to the same end. A syringe filled with morphia is perhaps better than asp or dagger, but nothing to brag of after all. As he spoke, he took off his dressing gown and got into the bed. Ah, passing into the dark one shivers, the night air's cold. One after the other, he blew out the candles and settled himself to rest in his usual position. Then silence came and filled the room. A little later, 'twas stirred by the Count's voice murmuring, "Thanks, John, thanks." And with a little sigh, as of a tired child, the dreamer slept. Ah, that's it. Okay,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah. So yeah, does anyone find that very satisfactory? I'm still not entirely sure why he killed himself, really.
Well, I was sure he was going to kill himself, or at least attempt it.
Yeah.
From the very first words that we started to read out this time, he got into his own head that somehow, because he's older than her and imperfect in relation to her, he is a blight on her life, which of course is total nonsense and complete solipsism on his part. But that was precisely why he's committing suicide, because he's lost the sense of the other human being.
But yeah, I mean, sorry, yeah, go on.
Maybe I'm overreading this, but there's a clue in the drooping eyelid that he couldn't put back. It could be that he's afraid of strokes and that he feels he might be getting one. And what he fears right now is not death, but incapacity that in his mind would burden her. In other words, you don't sometimes just die, but you become incapacitated, especially with stroke, which might be what the drooping eyelid was about. That's my speculation, that he didn't want to burden her with him being semi-paralyzed or anything.
Yeah, it's but I mean, he by dying, he's inflicting pain on her, and he hasn't really, I don't know, he hasn't, I mean, maybe he's made provision for her the rest of her life, but it sounds quite a harsh thing to do for him, really.
Giving her freedom, though, that's what I think what he's saying. He wants her to be free, and he knows he's going to be a burden, and that she's young. I mean, about Tupperware, we all handle it differently, and some of us want to just go on, but that was his course.
What did people think? Sorry, why the use of the word Jean, or yeah, Janine, or whatever the last word was, as opposed to her name Marie. I thought there was some significance in that, because that wasn't her name.
And that name wasn't ever mentioned earlier? I missed
No,
it.
I looked
No,
at that
I
and I
don't think so. Yeah.
and I saw, that means something. I don't know what it means. So did Janine, sorry, you're muted.
Is that the part that gave you misgivings?
Yeah, because I saw that there
So
was a
that's-
new name used there. It's not her name. What does that mean? I thought that is the crux of it, and I didn't understand it. Hugh, you got your hand up. Sorry, I spoke over you.
My gut was saying, wanted to say, and that's what I wanted to speak so quick, was he's a silly arsehole, bluntly. He needs to grow up. He's behaving like an adolescent brat who is not prepared to see through the commitment that he's made.
Right. Shall I just go to the last page again to see what we make of that? Yeah, it's where is it? Oh, what's going on here? So it seems a bit
There it was.
sorry, it's a bit, yeah, that's right. Jean, no, it's Jean. I don't know how do you pronounce it?
Jean.
Jean, yeah, Jean. What does that refer to? Thanks, Jean. Thanks. Who's that?
We don't know. I agree with you.
Well,
Yeah. Sorry, go on. Yeah, Janine, go on.
First name
Well-
of the matchmaker, the one that joined them together, you always hear her last name. Might her first name be that?
I don't think it's mentioned. I remember looking back over the book and I couldn't find it mentioned.
I'm wondering if it's her because she set them up.
No, no, I don't think it was. I mean, it was his. I mean, she was his ward, and he had put Marie in her care. So it wasn't her idea that they should marry. It was his idea.
It wasn't that's not the name of the one that they had for dinner the last night. And wasn't she responsible for them being together?
No, I didn't read. That wasn't my reading. I may be wrong. I thought that the thought came from him. He went to see the Countess de Rivarol, whatever her name was, and wanted to ask her to ask his ward. You know, I mean, he did use her. I mean, maybe it does relate to her, but her name I don't think was mentioned. I don't think her first name was mentioned. But yeah, maybe that is what it is, and it has no significance. Maybe I was thinking it.
Well, it's the
Sounds
ultimate.
like a mother figure to me.
Yeah, but he would probably have said mother then instead of a first name for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a bit casual, isn't it?
Yeah,
Thanks
yes.
instead of thank you.
He's a
Yeah.
child. So I think that it's a mother figure of some kind. And that's what
Yeah.
we intended to think. In other words, he's gone back to being a baby.
Yeah, I just said I couldn't find the reference at all in the book, so it's curious. So is the consensus here that actually that isn't significant somehow? It maybe refers to or is the author being rather forgetful in thinking that he's mentioned the name when he hasn't, maybe, which is not impossible.
Not at all. I think it is significant, and it could be a mother figure because I first thought that, but it does seem strange that he would call his mother by her name.
Yeah.
I think particularly I would stress for the whole style of which he spoke of, an old time in which people lived. It was not. It's not usual today, certainly not then, to call your mother by her first. I think unheard of.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
find it very strange that it's thanks and not thank you, because his language is so flowery and elaborate and exaggerated, and then suddenly this thanks. But I agree with Stead, it's quite mystifying. I certainly think it is supposed to have significance because it's
Yes.
introduced right at the end, so that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can't overlook
It's like a
it. We
twist,
can't-
isn't it?
You
A
can't
twist at
miss
the end.
it. It's the end, and you're waiting for the end, and there's this thanks, John. Thanks.
I think, okay,
I'm
here's
going
what I
well.
think about the entire story. I think we're missing the point here.
Which
What
is clear,
exactly-
yeah.
what is exactly going on here? He's in love with her youth. We've established that from the very, very beginning. Now she's pregnant. She has stopped being a girl. She's now a woman. And it's interesting that in his writing about his own sexual exploits, and I mean exploits, in his book, he
Yeah.
prefers very slim women, and he talks about her getting round. In other words, she's beginning to show in the pregnancy, which means what? He has married this young girl. It just goes on and on and on. You know, she's so wonderful. She's a saint. You know, she's little and she's sweet. On and on. What really happens in their marriage? She starts changing things. She's taking over her household. She's establishing her domain. I'm changing the decor. I'm changing our habits so that and this happens with many men who marry the woman they love, only to find that when she's actually becoming, especially men who marry young, 18, 19-year-old guys, they get married, and all of a sudden the goddess turns into a shrew, and they just go, oh my God. But they're not going to admit that to themselves, because it would mean that they were stupid or hijinksed or whatever. And so what's happened is that he can't live with the fact that he has his child bride is now a woman, and she is coming into her own in terms of, we need to go out, we need to see people, we need to have fun. In other words, the demands that she makes are not the demands of, you spend time with me, you fall at my feet and put roses on my toenails. None of this romantic stuff. That's over. And why? She's now pregnant. She's having a child. And whether or not modern people want to admit this, for a man, when his wife has a child, many men aren't as sexually interested in the women as they were before childbirth. Especially if they go in the labor room and see it being born.
Yeah,
There's this feeling of separation of the sexes, that somehow something is coming between them. And it's true. The woman falls in love with the baby. It has to happen, otherwise she's not going to be maternal. So, and that's a hormonal thing, right? That we're trying to pretend doesn't exist, but it does. And I think he cannot stand the fact he is dying in terms of his relationship with her as a child. Now, what's interesting is, I just read an essay written by a man on Substack about Lolita. And there's a lot of consistencies between Lolita and what we have just read in terms of pedophile. This is a young, and I think he goes to the doctor not just to ask about his heart, but to find out what society is going to feel about this elderly man marrying this very, very young girl. And I think that
you think so? So even though he doesn't say that explicitly, you think that's an implicit.
I think this is what's happened. Now, granted, she's not 6 years old, she's not 13, but she's a child. And he says over and over that you know, his child bride, his child bride, his child bride, you know, all this innocence and this, you know, and I think it's the argument that he has with himself is the argument of, have I really done right or have I done wrong in loving this girl? And now that she is a woman, a full-fledged woman, quite frankly, I don't think he wants her anymore.
And doesn't the text say that she isn't as beautiful as she was uh, when he first marries her? Because
Right. And
um,
see, in
woman.
his life, that's what he does. He, Mr. Harris himself, has a relationship with an older woman that he lies a lot to women. He figures out that if he flatters them and says, I want to marry you, and on and on and on, they'll give him sex. And he uses that. And in this story, you can see where he wants to use her, but not in a bad way. He marries her, but I don't think that he doesn't want her to change. The changes that he sees in himself, he now realizes are going to happen to her. And he doesn't want to live with her as a 40-year-old woman when he's 80. Because they're really,
I mean, he never says that explicitly, does he? I mean, would that? I mean, why wouldn't he say that more explicitly if that was the nub? So yeah, jump in, Hewitt. So.
I think Janine and I are on the same page, but coming at it from opposite end.
yeah,
And I think one might say that there's more than a little of Lewis Carroll in this man that Harris is portraying, that he does not want the woman he loves to grow up, which means he doesn't want to grow up.
right.
He doesn't want to face being in the world where there are not two people, but three people, where the world is social, where you have conflicts of love and admiration and all the rest of it. He wants the perfect illusion and connection and symbiosis of a perfect, well,
Right.
in many ways, I see it just as a fantasy. It's a fantasy that protects him from thinking and protects him from growing with the woman he loves. And
It's sort of a Peter Pan syndrome almost.
sorry, Jenny.
It's sort of like the Peter Pan syndrome, right? Peter
Yes,
and
yes.
Wendy has to grow up. Peter Pan stays a child, but he's not an
Oh, I
ignorant.
was just going to say, AJ, yeah, what's your view? Yeah,
Just a very quick comment in support of what Janine is saying. I noticed a few pages back, and I believe it's page 125, for the first time, this girl, child, whatever, is called the Countess. She was never referred to as Countess before. She is a woman now, and she's a Countess, and she's growing into that role. You know,
Yes.
that was it. That was my comment, you know.
And her gratitude is for him. He is allowing her through marriage and wealth and whatever position to have a good life. But a good life to a woman who's raising a child is having resources. And he's provided that. But that's not really what he wants. What he wants, I think, I agree with you. It's that enclosed, our own separate paradise where everything else is excluded except them, which is what? Puppy love, teenage love, Romeo and Juliet kind of love, as opposed to two grown people who are going to grow old and die. And I don't think he wants to see her grow old and die.
I thought actually, I mean, my thoughts on reading it initially were nothing like the thoughts that you two have had. I thought that in that use in the use of Jian, there was some clue that maybe this was his daughter. This was his illegitimate daughter, and he didn't want to face the consequences of having committed incest with her. I thought that might be in that name, but I can't find any support for that. The name doesn't appear. The intermediary aristocratic lady is always referred to as Madame de Rivarol, nothing else. So yeah, there surely must be some significance in using that name. It must, I don't know, otherwise he wouldn't have done it so pointedly in the last few words.
Well, just because he wasn't married doesn't mean that he did not, when he was a young man, have encounters. For all we know, you know, this Jeanne person could be a Harlan. We don't know. But obviously, that this young girl is the first person that he's married.
Was that the mother? Was that maybe her mother? And he'd actually had a relationship, and she was his daughter, and he's referring to the woman's mother, maybe.
Well, and the fact that he says thanks.
Yeah, Hewitt, please.
The fact that this Jeanne person is not a highborn woman of great character.
Yeah, exactly. That might be. Yeah, Hewitt, go on. Yeah.
I think we're being too concrete here. I think Jean in the French context is a very generic name. It's like John in English for a man. I think it reflects a kind of older woman feeling about it. Who knows, it even might refer to Joan of Arc. And it has that resonance. I don't think it's an individual. I don't think there's any question of actual incest. I think it's more easy to think of it if you think of the conversation between the caterpillar and Alice in Alice Through the Looking Glass, I think it is, where the caterpillar recommends that at the best age to leave off growing is the age of 7.
AJ, please.
I have to leave, so I have a very quick comment that I promised to make before.
Yeah, I was just going to say, please, yeah, about the older people having children, yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting is that we used to believe, because it's evident, that older women have a lot of mutations in their babies, like non-disjunction event trisomy that leads to Down syndrome. And for a long time, I guess due to societal prejudices, the older women were blamed. Said it's the older women. It turns out it's been found recently that most of the mutations in babies come from the men that these women are with, who are typically even older than the women, you see.
Yeah,
so,
that's interesting.
Men accumulate a lot more mutations in their sperm than women accumulate in their eggs, because early in life, all those eggs are created, then put into a little piggy bank.
Yeah.
As needed until they're all done. With the men, because we're so profligate with our sperm, essentially, we're constantly regenerating sperm, and a lot of cell division leads to more mutations. So actually, what the doctor said may have been good for the 19th century, but an older man having a baby with a younger woman, especially that old, is actually quite a bad idea.
Okay, that's useful. Yeah, Hewitt. Yeah, Hewitt.
Interesting.
Just as a personal testimony, I was born in March 1945 while Adolf Hitler was still alive, and my parents, who were 65 and 45, my father was 65 and my mother was 45, gone together through childless, through the second major war of the century. And they had a Lakeland holiday after the Normandy landings of 1944, and there I was conceived. And my father had his faults and his limitations, but he did not shrink from the business of fatherhood and of representing to me what being a father was all about. And as to genetics, the Wilkinson genes are fairly strong ones, and there's often long-lived Wilkinsons, and I will be 80 next year. So I can say that I think that this man should not have yielded to his fantasies and should have been bolder and lived out what he had committed himself to.
And so
Michael.
even older, I sympathize with this man, the Count. I mean, I think we're all different. We all have different approaches, and I became a father when I was 50. So, and not that the mother was that much. I mean, she was in her late 30s, but you know, again, we're all different, and it all comes out differently.
Yeah, yeah.
But I agree. I think that name at the end, and I don't see that it had to be thank you. He's going. He's on his way out. You just say thanks, thanks. It seems to me that would be a more natural thing than to say thank you, Jean. Thank you. I mean, it would just.
Michael, who is it? Do you think he's addressing?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
It could have been an earlier affair that he had.
Mhm.
Presumably with the woman's with her mother. That is surely there must be a connection.
Yeah, it would be the mother then in that case.
Yeah, yeah.
First part of it. I don't know
It's a shame Mr. Harris isn't here to answer our questions. I think that would be interesting.
And I've been agreeing with everybody, which is principally why I've been quiet. The only thing we haven't touched on is he how ill is he really? I mean, he obviously is he fooling himself that he's ill, or he's because the doctor and does the doctor, who's slightly sinister, I find, sort of, but I'm prejudiced. It's not a profession I care for.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like all the same. I think the doctor is slightly sinister and seems to be intimating that he's very sick, and he believes it himself. Do people think that's right, or is he trying to persuade himself in order to have a pretext for killing himself? I don't know. I'm just trying. That's a kind of the second question I have about.
It would be interesting to know whether the views of the doctor were very typical of the views that was thought of as being correct at that time. I don't know. Really. It's hard to hard to say. Really, I mean, from our perspective, it seems absurd that someone who's reasonably healthy in you know what is my age would therefore think he needs to commit suicide. You know,
but is he reasonably healthy? That's
well,
not,
you see, I mean,
is he? I mean, when he has that, they have that final conversation, it was a little unclear to me whether he thought he was feeling these pains, whether these pains were metaphorical and not real, or whether he was really.
The doctor never specified anything.
No, sorry,
specific.
not that. No, the conversation with his wife at the end. Yeah, and he's beating heart. I mean, was that just an image, or was his heart really beating fast? I mean, is he getting close to a stroke? Right?
Emotional pain.
I mean, is it psychosomatic, or does he really? Is he really close to a stroke?
Pain, Michael, because emotional pain of the heart is felt physiologically.
Yes, I appreciate that could be what's happening, but not necessarily. I think it's a bit unclear.
Does anyone? I don't. Does anyone think there's a moral in this story or not? I don't think that there is. He's creating a piece of art. I'm not sure that he's trying. That you know he's trying to make some point that we should observe. It's hard to know, really. It's hard to know.
Well, I think
I said I have to go.
Oh, okay, AJ. Thanks so much for your contribution as always. Appreciate it. You know,
one clarification. I didn't say that an older man engendering babies will always create mutations.
It's statistical, yeah.
Not that it happens 100%.
Yeah.
It's actually a minority of the cases, but you know, I just wanted to point out that it's not the age of the woman. That's been recently, the last decade. But I really do go. I guess I'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, have a good Yuletide and see you in January. I hope. You know, AJ, it's good to always have you with us. Bye. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
I do think the more we're talking about it, I do think the incest thing, I think it's a way of covering up. And what I notice again, from this essay about Lolita is that, and this person's argument is the subject is so ugly, and the true test of an artist is not to make a reproduction of something that's beautiful, but to take something that's ugly and make it beautiful, as a defense of Nabokov's writing this book. I think it's probably right. I think it's about incest. Not only,
and that isn't something that maybe he would want to speak about, because at that time it was perhaps something that,
absolutely. I mean,
you know, even now, you know, it's not a
and I'll tell you, the clue is when he asks the doctor, is my age going to infect the child? And I thought that was a very curious word to use, infect.
Yeah.
In terms of age and reproduction. You know, and I can see that.
Hugh, if you got thanks a lot for your contributions to the debate, which was unusually necessary, I think, for this text that does require different opinions to amplify its hidden meaning. So thanks very much for coming. I appreciate that, and good to see you in good health at, you know, at this age, you know. But we've but you're not the oldest here, so and Michael's a good example for us all to aspire to, you know, looking younger by the meaning. You look extremely well, Michael. You really do. Maybe it's a trick of the light, but you seem to have no wrinkles at all.
Yeah. All right, just to go back to the character, how old is he supposed to be in the story?
I think
yes, I wanted to ask that. Yeah.
I think he's 62 or something. He's very similar to my age. Yeah.
All right, but I think one can know that one is dying. I think that's a possibility, and he seems to be referring to these ailments, and he's aware of them.
What about syphilis? Is sort of something with the eye, a symptom of syphilis? That was a thing that was common at that time, wasn't it? Syphilis, maybe.
Well, very much in public and private mind. Well, in private, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right.
So that could have been. He may have thought that, and he didn't want to deal with the fact that he'd been passing it on or something. I don't know.
He didn't want his wife to see him. The syphilis, and the fact that she was pregnant, the syphilis, and yes, it can affect.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah. And then perhaps Cheyenne was a prostitute that he slept with.
Yeah.
But why would he then, if the prostitute? I think it
it wouldn't make sense saying thank you, really, unless it's just
unless she taught him how to make love.
An irony that as you die, you make these relatively trivial comments rather than the dramatic last words, you know, that you expect to make when you die.
When there's an anomaly in real life, there's a reason for it. When there's an anomaly in a piece of fiction, sometimes it's a red herring.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. That's that's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a good maybe a statement to end with or something. I don't know. Yeah, that's it.
I think very worth reading, Stead. So thank you very much for having introduced that. And
thank you for taking time to read it. I appreciate that. Bye, Hugh. Good to have you with us. Michael, when you coming to London?
London.
Sorry, you're in London. Oh, excellent. Well, maybe when the weather's a bit more temperate, we can meet up for some time. I think it'd be nice to.
All right, great.
I think that.
We'll
I just said my friend is a member of the Athenaeum. That would be fun to go there, wouldn't it?
Yes, I love the Athenaeum.
Maybe that's an experience you've had enough of. It wouldn't be new to you.
No, not at all. I actually wanted to join it, but you need to know 2 members in it.
Oh, well, maybe I should introduce you to my friend. That counts one of them. That's good. That's good.
What is that?
It's a rather grand. Well, it's a very grand club with a splendid building, not that far from Buckingham Palace, which it has automatic membership for various Nobel Prize laureates and has a lot of academics and members of the clergy as members.
And it has
But
has a figure of a.
So it's a
Athena, yeah.
society. Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's a nice it's a nice club. It's a nice club. But certainly not as good value as the place I took you, which is like £30 a month, which is ridiculous. Yeah.
There is a difference, yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Well, you
Oh,
both call it the Athenaeum, so I must assume you're right. All my life I've thought of it as Athenium, but I've never been near it. It is the Athenaeum. You must be right. Yeah. So,
But-
live and learn. Yeah.
I've
yeah.
always heard any word that's over 3 syllables, you can pronounce it any way you wish.
Oh, right, right.
Yeah. No, that's good. All right. Well, yeah. We can finish the meeting now. But thanks everyone for coming, and thanks so much, Janine, for coming. Yeah. I know it distance doesn't matter on Zoom, but I appreciate your presence. All right, then. Well, enjoy the rest of Sundays, and we'll be in
Merry
touch.
Christmas or
Yeah.
Yule, and all the best for the new year.
Yeah.
We see
See one another in January with
one another hopefully in January.
yeah.
Great.
Bye bye.